Keir Starmer is letting British companies supply spare parts for Israel's most advanced fighter jet, despite suspending some arms exports to Israel over supposed human rights concerns. Now, Israel is using those fighter jets not just to bomb Palestine, but also Lebanon and as far away as Yemen. Joining me now to discuss the Yemen side of that story is a journalist who has lived and worked for many years in Yemen, Iona Craig.
Good morning, Phil.
Iona, you wrote a story for us last week investigating the massive civilian impact of Israel's two bombing raids on Yemen in July and September this year, which human rights groups have warned could amount to war crimes. Can you talk us through just why those raids were so devastating for Yemen's civilian economy?
Yeah, so the first lot of those bombing runs happened back in July, on the 20th of July, and were in response to a Houthi attack in Tel Aviv that had successfully hit near a US consulate building. And in response to that, Israel then carried out these first strikes, which was sort of two air raids, really, in two different locations in Hodeidah. But primarily was the most sort of spectacular, if you like, of those was on the oil storage facilities. And there were dozens of oil storage facilities that were set ablaze by the airstrikes. The capacity was for around 150,000 tons. So that's, a significant quantity of oil storage facilities or fuel storage facilities in the most densely populated part of the country. Israel has targeted in those strikes, both in July and the ones we saw at the end of September as well, is the targeting of power stations in addition to that fuel storage capability. Hodeidah is one of the hottest places on earth. And, when you put humidity and wind factor in built into that. I mean, I've spent quite a bit of time over several years in Hodeidah and in other places in Yemen. And Hodeidah, I will always go back to as being the most difficult place to function because of the heat. And obviously, when you knock out the electricity infrastructure, as happened in the most recent strikes, then people have been forced to live without electricity and therefore without fans or air conditioning or anything to keep cool in that respect. And it becomes immediately a struggle within hours of the electricity infrastructure being impacted in a city like that or in the governorate as a whole. And that, pointed out in the report, is how people were struggling immediately after those strikes because of that, and children suffering because of that. The child with heat rash that I mentioned in the piece that Muatana, the Yemeni human rights organization, had spoken to. So yes, the immediate, it's very immediate, that kind of impact in somewhere like Hodeidah because it's just ridiculously hot. And unlike Sana'a, so the Yemeni capital Sana'a that the Houthis control is right up in the mountains. It's kind of 2,000 meters. So it's relatively cool. It never gets really above about 30 degrees, and it's never really below 16 degrees during the day, even in the winter. But Hodeidah is completely different. It is unbelievably humid there, and a kind of heat that just sends you into insanity. And I spent a lot of time in Aden when the power supplies have been bad or been shut down, and that becomes very difficult very quickly as well. But not really. Hodeidah is just almost indescribable kind of heat in those kind of conditions.
So this is why groups like Human Rights Watch have accused Israel's attacks on Yemen as being disproportionate. Proportionality, of course, is a key principle of international law. While Israel will say it was attacked by Houthi rockets, the idea that then gives it a justification to just take out civilian power plants and oil storage facilities is hotly contested by human rights experts. In the piece, you point out that the US and UK bombing raids on Yemen, which have been going on since January in response to the Houthi blockade of Israeli shipping in the Red Sea, those have been relatively more targeted. I mean, I know that there has been civilian harm that's resulted from some of them, but the Israeli airstrikes, in contrast, just seemed so much more like a kind of punitive attack on Yemen's infrastructure and economy.
The argument could be, well, hang on a minute, if you've got US, UK strikes happening anywhere in Yemen, how is it worse that the Israelis are doing it and they're using British parts? And the kind of reason is it is worse is because what you touched on is the civilian harm that has been done in those strikes. And there have been, I was looking at these figures yesterday, a total of, by the UK, or they're US led strikes, most of them are US. But the US UK sort of joint operation strikes have been 258 of those strikes, and including airstrikes. And the civilian casualties out of those 258 have totaled 85. And then you look at the numbers for Israel, and that's totally different. So you've got they've just carried out 6 air raids in July, and then in September over in 2 days, or in 2 separate missions. And the civilian harm has totaled 154. So that basically means that there's approximately 1 civilian casualty in every 3 air raids that the US UK operation is carrying out. For Israeli airstrikes, that's 77 civilian casualties for every 3 air raids. So it's completely, it's incomparable, really, in that respect.
Now, we know that Israel used F-35 fighter jets in these raids because they even had a CNN crew on board one of the air refueling tankers. We don't always know what type of aircraft Israel uses for its airstrikes. There was a strike on Beirut, I think on the 20th of September, where a Hezbollah commander was killed, along with scores of civilians. Entire apartment block was leveled, and the Israeli Air Force admitted to using an F-35 in that operation. This is an issue that Keir Starmer is going to come under more pressure, I think, next month at the High Court in London, where the group Global Legal Action Network, who we've interviewed before on this channel, are challenging the government's rationale for suspending 30 arms export licenses out of around 350 and excluding F-35 parts. Of course, in the UK, the ejection seat for the F-35 is made here. Also, the rear fuselage is made by BAE. So significantly more than 15% of the aircraft's components are made in the UK. And as we know, when these fighter jets are doing high intensity operations, they get through lots and lots of spare parts and need constant maintenance after each operation. Iona, I mean, the Houthis in some respects, though, are giving kind of as good as they get, aren't they? I mean, they've made huge advances in their missile program to be able to target Israel as well as shipping in the Red Sea. Can you tell us a bit about how they've been able to do that, and whether that's purely because of help from Iran, or is there more of a kind of domestic development program going on there?
Yeah, I mean, they've fired hundreds of missiles into Israel, or at Israel. A lot of them haven't always, made it beyond Israeli airspace, really. And a lot of them haven't been successful because they either haven't reached their targets, or that they have been taken down by Israeli air defenses. And they certainly wouldn't have had this capability, 10 years ago when they took over Sana'a in 2014. And it's a combination of a few things. So when they took over the state in 2014, when the sort of coup happened between 2014 and sort of early 2015, they took over all elements of the state. So that included the Air Force, it included the ballistic missile stores, and most of those in the Yemeni military at that time were Russian, and aging Russian sort of missile stores and army sort of hardware, if you like. But then since 2014, you have had this support that's come from Iran, and that's come in various forms. You've had Iranian Revolutionary Guard members inside Yemen training the Houthis, both ground troops, but also in building ballistic missiles and drones. And certainly when you've seen the kind of military parades that the Houthis have regularly put on, the missiles that they're producing directly pretty much match what you would see in an Iranian similar military parade in Tehran. A lot of these components, they're coming from all over the place. A lot of them are coming from China. But yeah, the Houthis wouldn't have had these capabilities, which they've now built up over the last 10 years, in almost all parts to Iran. They've also had training from Hezbollah as well, but they wouldn't have had the capability to have struck Israel or targeted Israel without that support network, without a shadow of a doubt.
Thanks, Iona. It's great to have you with us again to explain the intricacies of the situation in Yemen and giving a level of detail and nuance that you don't often see in the mainstream media. Thanks for watching this video from Declassified UK. If you haven't already subscribed to our channel, please press the button below. And if you want to support our work, you can make a donation through the Super Thanks button or head to our website and become a member of Declassified from £3 a month. Thanks for watching.